bringing Steph Ryder at the Atlantic and Applebaum, and so much to talk about. I mean, but let's just focus on the vice president for a minute, who said deeply unhelpful and at times false things about Ukraine over the years. And last night saying, oh, don't talk to allies, don't talk to Europeans that are coming together to support you. Donald Trump's the only game in town. And at the same time, mocking and ridiculing the sacrifices that our allies have made supporting the United States in wars that we have declared over the past 25 years.
So I'm in Europe, and actually yesterday I was in Germany, and the day before, a couple of days ago, I was in Vilnius in Lithuania. And I don't think it's possible to exaggerate the scale of the shock and surprise that people feel here. Some of it is about Ukraine, of course, but some of it is also about America. I mean, I think Europeans, maybe uniquely in the world, maybe along with Canadians, a few others, have this idea of Americans, some of it a little bit maybe Hollywood-esque, you know, they're the good guys who fight the bad guys. You know, they show up eventually and they solve the problem. You know, they're the honorable ones who fight against treachery and evil. And of course, that's an old stereotype, and Hollywood doesn't even make those kinds of movies anymore. But the degree to which, the suddenness with which that old fondness and memories of the Second World War and memories of the Cold War has suddenly been swapped for something completely different, sort of a brutal, sarcastic, mocking America, an America that uses the language of Russian propaganda to talk about its closest allies, an America that makes apparently arbitrary decisions. I mean, I would say that the treatment of Zelensky in the Oval Office and the tariffs on Canada and Mexico go in the same basket. I mean, they're both angry, arbitrary, kind of thin-skinned decisions that don't seem to have any basis in any rational argument. And this has already, I think, had a profound change on the perceptions of America in the world, and the willingness that our allies will have in the future to work with us again.
So here is more from that Vice President Vance interview last night, where he stated that the only U.S. security guarantee for Ukraine will be the mineral deal, and then downplayed the role of British and French peacekeeping troops.
And here's the thing, you know, when you would talk to the Biden administration officials in private, it's another example of a terrible situation the Biden admin left the Trump administration. When you ask them what's the plan, okay, we're going to spend tens of billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars in Ukraine. What is your plan? And they would honestly tell you, well, we're just going to send them weapons for as long as we can and hope eventually they can turn the tide. Hope is not a strategy. Throwing money and ammunition at a terrible conflict, that is not a strategy. The only guy in town with a strategy is the President of the United States, and everybody needs to follow his lead.
What scares me is Zelensky, when he says it's going to go on for years, how many more lives are going to be lost? He's not going to have a country to save at the end of that. The minerals deal would have provided the monies to rebuild their country and a strong U.S. presence and maybe European troops as well.
And this is an important part of it. The president knows that, look, if you want real security guarantees, if you want to actually ensure that Vladimir Putin does not invade Ukraine again, the very best security guarantee is to give Americans economic upside in the future of Ukraine. That is a way better security guarantee than 20,000 troops from some random country that hasn't fought a war in 30 or 40 years. The security guarantee and also the economic guarantee for Ukraine is to rebuild the country and ensure that America has a long-term interest. You're not going to do that if you come to the Oval Office, insult the president, and refuse to follow his plan for peace.
I mean, this is like, what was it, Stranger Things, where at the end of the season that everything turns upside down and the world is upside down underground? I mean, we have two people here talking. They remind me of what Democrats were saying about Daniel Ortega and Nicaragua in the 1980s. I mean, they're saying we don't get peace through strength. We get peace by undercutting our allies in Europe and by capitulating to Russians. Name one time. Nobody can name one time when capitulating to Vladimir Putin our Russians or the Soviet Union paid any benefits at all. And we can go back to Yalta. After Yalta, we can move forward. John Kennedy being humiliated in his Vienna summit with Khrushchev. We can move forward, and just with Vladimir Putin, talk about George W. Bush looking into Putin's eyes and reading his soul. And a couple of years later, what happened? Vladimir Putin looked into Georgia, invaded them, and we did nothing. Barack Obama in 2012. What did Barack Obama do? He whispered to Medvedev, hey, after the election, we can do more things. Yeah, after the election, Russia invaded Ukraine. Russia invaded Crimea. Russia shot down commercial aircraft. Every time we show weakness, Russia runs over us. And right now, you have those people. They did it in the White House, saying, this is what we're going to do. We're going to undercut our allies who have been beating the Russians back for over 2 years now, 3 years. And we're going to start basically sounding like we work on RT. And we're going to copy Russian talking points. And we're going to insult America's closest and most loyal allies. That's what they were doing. The vice president talked about some random country that hasn't fought a war in 30 or 40 years. We're not on X here. Like, we can do fact checks. And this random country, Great Britain, the country we have a special relationship, some random country? Well, here's a list of recent wars that random country fought alongside with the United States. In 1990, the Gulf War. The British lost 47 lives. 1992, the Bosnian War. 59 British personnel died. 1998, the Kosovo War. They fought alongside of us. 72 Brits killed. 2000, the Sierra Leone Civil War. 2 personnel died. 2001, the war in Afghanistan, 457 British personnel lost their lives. 2003, the Iraq War, 179 Brits lost their lives. 136 killed in hostile incidences. And then you go on and you see that the overall war on terror was proportionally 12% deadlier for the United Kingdom than it was for Americans, based on the number of troops deployed and the number of troops killed. 3 times the number of British troops were shot and killed in Afghanistan than they were in Iraq. And a UK soldier was twice as likely to be shot and killed than their U.S. counterpart. And Applebaum, I don't know where to begin. I really don't. Calling Britain some random country when they have stood behind, much to their detriment. Tony Blair basically gave up being prime minister because he sided with George W. Bush and the Iraq War because he believed it was that important that the special relationship be maintained. And here we have a vice president mocking and ridiculing our closest allies.
He's mocking and ridiculing a relationship that for the British has been central to their foreign policy for 100 years. British intelligence works so closely with American intelligence, it's hard to pick them apart. British strategy, British personnel, British aid policy has all been adapted to work around and with American policy as well. The British think of themselves as partners of the United States, and they've been treated as such, actually, by all recent administrations. They've had the special relationship, which sometimes it was a personal relationship, whether it was Reagan and Thatcher, whether more strangely it was George W. Bush and Tony Blair, has always been at the center of both of our countries' foreign policy. So yes, it's insulting and rude to imply otherwise. I mean, there were other things that disturbed me about that Vance interview. One of them was the implication that Zelensky won't sign a minerals deal. He will sign one. He came to Washington to sign it. It was Donald Trump who decided not to sign it. The other oddity is this pretense and that signing the deal is equivalent to some kind of strategy, some kind of negotiation strategy, or some kind of security guarantee for Ukraine. Actually, the U.S. administration has still not told us what the ceasefire would look like, what the end of the war will look like. And people are beginning to worry that they simply mean that Russia wins or that the Ukraine stops fighting. So there's so much lack of clarity. You know, Vance speaks with great certainty. He's a good speaker. He sounds convincing. But when you pick apart what he says, there's so little underneath it. It's disturbing.
Well, especially when it comes to Ukraine and it comes to our allies and attacks on our allies. And John Lemire, he tries to backtrack. Like this morning, I think he tweeted, speaking of X, I think he went and said, oh, wait a second, I wasn't talking about Britain or France. No, that's actually, we were talking about the Europeans, and that's actually who's bringing the deal together. It was Keir Starmer and Macron that were going to come together, work with Zelensky, bring the deal to the United States. And of course, the head of any coalition is France and Great Britain and the people, again, who stood by us in Europe during all of these wars over the past 25 years. Nobody was talking about Luxembourg or Liechtenstein. Britain and France, the first among equals there.
Yeah, the vice president indeed took to X today to claim that this is absurdly dishonest. He wasn't talking about the UK or France. He was taken out of context. Mind you, this appeared last night on Sean Hannity.
Who is he talking about then?
Yeah,
who is he talking about then? Because the way the question was set up, it is Britain and it is France who are at the front of all of this, and everybody in Washington knows this. Everybody in Europe knows this. I guarantee you everybody in Russia knows this. Everybody around the world knows this. So the gaslighting, who's he talking about?
He doesn't say.
Is he talking about Liechtenstein? Is he talking about Luxembourg? Because I didn't see their leaders talking about what they were going to do in defense of Ukraine. I saw Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron basically say, we're going to work together, we're going to help on the minerals deal, and we're going to bring it to Donald Trump. And that's what J.D. Vance was responding to. He said, oh, no, you can only talk to Donald Trump. Don't talk to our allies who have been with us for 100 years.
Yeah, if he was taken out of context, talk to the Sean Hannity's producers, I suppose. In his post this morning, Vance does not identify. He just says there are other countries he was referring to. He claims it was not UK for other countries.
Oh, okay.
We should note that UK and France have both actually committed troops to Ukraine if necessary. We heard that from Keir Starmer again over the weekend. Macron's made a similar pledge. So